Diamond, Diamond.
A precious gem of the most valuable kind. When pure, it is clear.
Diamond, Diamond.
A family name bringing traditions of love, hard work, and moral values.
This is the Diamond Education Podcast with my mom and dad, Johnny and Kelly England.
This is part 2 of our conversation with Rob Wood, the Fatherhood Ninja. We were so excited to talk with him, and this week we will be discussing education and homeschool education specifically. If you'd like to hear our conversation about fatherhood and its benefits for children in general, you can listen to part 1, which we published last week. Hope you enjoy. Why is it that you and your wife homeschool your children as opposed to anything else? So why did you guys choose homeschool?
So that's actually an interesting story. We weren't necessarily ever on board with homeschooling. In the beginning, like I said, my wife was a public school teacher for about 8 years, and she wanted to be home. Her heart and hope was to be a homemaker, and to get out of that corporate world. And so we worked and labored, and I was like, you know how it is, got to make more money, got to provide more resources. So let's make this a reality.
Yeah.
And when we moved to Arkansas 10 years ago, that's when we made that a reality. So she's been in the home for 10 years.
Nice.
The last 10 years, but we weren't on board with homeschooling.
Yeah.
She wanted to be a homemaker, but we still sent my son to public school. So my son was actually in public school through second grade before we transitioned to homeschool. And the funny thing is how the Lord works and all these things. The only reason we started researching homeschool and got my son into homeschool was because we spent a season overseas. We moved to India. And so and I still worked and did the things I did from the financial side, but just remotely. We kind of had this vision and dream to want to be in India. I've been going for, 12, 13 years and been to India 15, 16 times, and never took my family. I was like, let's go and live there and keep doing the work that we're doing. We did some orphan care work and some church planning work there too, but
Nice.
But primarily I just want to live there. I'm going to be honest. I really did. I love being around that culture. I love the people that we met there, the friendships I built there. And so we did. And so moving overseas required us to rethink how we're going to educate our children. And so my wife, being the type A researcher that she is, just went on a tirade and learned everything and anything she could get her hands on. She's truly brilliant when it comes to education. And I mean that sincerely. I know everybody dotes on their significant others, but well, some people do, some people don't. But she really is a brilliant teacher, and she always had that reputation. Even when she was in public school, everybody loved her. She's an incredible teacher. And so we transitioned my son, primarily my daughter was still really, really young, into homeschooling, and we landed on. I know that was one of the questions you wanted to ask was, what model do we use? We use classical conversations is the model we use. We fell in love with the classical approach to education. It's rooted in a lot of history, a lot of proven success in educating bright, critical thinking, intelligent kids.
Yeah.
We really, really, really like it. And so that's how we got involved in the homeschool research. I always had that stigma, and I hate to, I'm ashamed to admit this. I just wasn't big on homeschool. I was a public school guy. My wife was a public school gal, and I've never had a real problem with it. But I will say, when you have your own kids, things begin to start shifting how you view the world.
Yep.
And my second grade son is coming home wondering, why kids are watching pornography on their phones at school. Second graders, first and second graders, wondering why boys are wearing dresses, things like that. We had crazy encounters just in second grade, and it really kind of struck me with conviction that, man, I'm shipping my son off to be influenced for 8 hours a day. We're the primary influence in his life. I don't care what the government says or what teachers even say. My wife was a teacher. I'd say that too. It's like, no, we're the primary influence. But if I'm shirking that responsibility and giving that responsibility away, I don't really have that strong of a voice in my kid's life.
Right.
And it became very apparent that we didn't. So when we began to transition into homeschool, we realized very quickly that this was powerful and this was good and it was best for our family. And then we moved back. And so we're like, we're going to stick with this because we really like the growth that my son has had. My son he was a lot like me in school. He's like, he just wasn't interested. And I'm not trying to make like I know girls get bored in school too, but boys really get bored in school.
Yeah.
So we kept on with the homeschool trek and really loved his progress and really fell in love with it. Found a local classical conversations group that he's just really thrived in.
Nice.
And yeah, we've just never looked back. And so we're huge proponents now because we see just how much growth was happening in my own son. And then now my daughter, she's been there from the beginning. So she's just gold.
Yeah.
One of the happiest kids on planet Earth.
Yeah.
She is just lost in wonder, lost in adventure, lost in her little world that she's created. And we're seeing now the fruit of all of that. Now, we still struggle with my son with certain things, but he's more than happy to be in homeschool. But with her starting from day one and never having set foot in a public school, man, it's just been, it's like moving to see her heart be so free. That's how kids should be. They should be so free. And she's just as happy as a lark. She hates reading from time to time. I get all that. You're like, oh my God, my kid hates. I was like, so what? She's doing great. She's growing. She's playing like crazy. And then, man, she's now reading like a champ. It's just things that come in progression, and you give them space to grow and learn. It's truly remarkable. Truly remarkable.
Yeah. One of the things I like to say is anybody who has more than one child understands that not every kid is the same.
No, gosh, no, not even close.
They are. I mean, we have 4 girls, and each one of those 4 girls is their own person, and so it's not even a gender thing, right? It's they are their own person, and
they're sovereign individuals.
And being able to, that's one of the things. We're still kind of new to this homeschool aspect. We homeschool most of our children. We have 2 that go to a religious school here close by that we really love, but yeah, we've loved it. This is just our second year in doing it, and it's one of the things I love is I can I teach one of my children math before I go to work each day. Like I get take that time and have a 30 minutes, an hour or whatever working on math with her and building that relationship, and I love it. And so what do you feel your role as a father is in the homeschool environment? You talked about, before we started recording, how really it's your wife who's running the show, but you still have a role there.
Yeah. And like I said, it depends on the father's situation and responsibilities with his work and things like that. But, from my side, I think I play a massive support role to my wife as a relief pitcher, so to speak, to come in the evenings and maybe bring some space for her to kind of decompress and kind of refuel for the evening. And I take the kids, and I hate to say it this way, but because there's a stigma that says, oh, dads get to have all the fun, moms have to do all the hard work. Unfortunately, it kind of works that way a little bit in our house. Getting wiggles out and bringing pressure to their bodies. We do a lot of wrestling and a lot of physical interaction. This is true for both genders, both boys and girls. Obviously, specifically for boys, that wrestling and pressure, believe it or not, needs to actually keep going through college. A lot of people don't talk about this. You should be roughhousing with your boys even when they're 21 years old. It's so critical to their development and so critical to their happiness and their joy and to being well-rounded men in society later. So I always encourage guys, even if you have a 21-year-old, if he's in college and he walks in that door, tackle him and wrestle and fight. But yeah, so we do a lot of that. I help my son with, I teach him logic, a class. I've not done a great job this year because work has gotten in the way of that. And so my wife is now taking more on a facilitator role of that as well. And so I try to interact with what they're learning, what they're doing. Maybe this is a good word for it. Play more of like a recap role, and just have them recapping, okay, what did we learn today? What did we engage in today? What are some themes, maybe high points, low points? What'd you like? What'd you not like? I try to draw, what they've learned out of them, and then, play in that realm, because, work comes in seasons. This has been a busy season for us. So I'm busy a lot. So I haven't been at home during the day as much as I normally could be. Potentially. So, I make it a point to try to get home for lunch and try to interact even those times. But again, when you're building business and stuff, your lunch hours get taken up. You're meeting with people, meeting with business owners. And so we just try to really balance that. But she does all the heavy lifting. She is an incredible teacher, and I'm more of a support role in that to kind of reinforce ideas. Maybe she's working because I've got a 14-year-old son, so that dynamic's hard for him and her.
Yeah.
I need to come in and reinforce some things with him
Mm-hmm.
in a more creative way, like throwing the football. It's amazing the kind of conversations that you and your son can have when you're throwing a ball.
Mm-hmm.
His attention is off. Oh, you're talking to me about school. No, we're throwing the ball, talking about ideas and concepts. That helps him tremendously to kind of open up and actually regurgitate some of the things he's learned. And so I don't know, I'm really learning that. I'm trying to figure out how to be best servant in that to my family. But yeah, she does 99% of the work.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Rob, we've taken so much of your time. I'd like to just really end with kind of two questions we ask everybody, if you're good with that. So the first one is, what is education? I mean, we've been talking about education, but what is that? When you say education, what do you think of?
I know what Webster says.
Yeah.
The Webster 18 and 28 is an awesome definition of education. So,
so as a family, we define education from a classical approach.
Yeah.
To be honest, so we look at education really defined as the trivium. We look at grammar. We look at the dialectic and the rhetoric pieces. And so ultimately, I think the purpose of education is to know God.
Yeah.
And to make him known through the way you live your life, and not just your words, but your actions. Kind of that faith without works is dead mentality. Let's get out in the world and create beauty and create goodness and manifest that. So I think the purpose of education is to know him.
Yeah.
But as it relates to what is it? For us, it's the trivium. It's understanding the steps that our children are growing and developing in those three categories. Because when you look at grammar, for example, when you learn to read, you learn the names of letters, you learn the sounds they make, and classical educators call that the grammar stage. This is like a human developmental stage. And so young children really enjoy this phase, and they love repeating, songs, and they chant rhyme. They love these things, pronouncing words. And so from an educational standpoint, you want to capitalize on that enjoyment.
yeah.
So you teach young students grammar of many subjects and many ideas that they know nothing about through songs and through chanting and through practicing with family and friends. And that's what classical education calls foundations.
Yeah.
And so, that grammar stage of the program is really powerful because it's the building block for learning all subjects.
Yeah.
Science, math, geography, Latin, English, history, public speaking, fine arts, all the good stuff.
Yeah.
Education shifts in the child to that dialectic stage, and that's that second step where they're learning how to sort ideas and compare ideas and understand words and the rules that apply to those words.
Yeah.
For example, again, when you're learning to read, students will, learn how to put letters together to form words, how to construct sentences, and they call that dialectic stage because much of the work done in that stage is accomplished through dialogue. And so as they're reading and learning, we're talking and engaging, and it's building in that their education to become, again, well-rounded, critical thinking, problem-solving, adults. And we capitalize on that enjoyment. Kids love that process. It's usually between the ages of 10 and 13 that they really love that stage. And so you capitalize on it and how you educate them. And then we move kind of into that rhetoric stage. And that's where they really learn to solve problems.
Yeah.
That's where the teenager comes in. And this is where it all kind of comes together. All that education, all those phases of life, all of that work comes to a head, and they become problem solvers. They can write original thoughts. They have actual ideas. They have an identity. They're individuals. They write papers. They lead discussions. They debate. They interact. And again, when you're reading, this would be the time that you focus on themes and context and of what you've read, and then you actually learn how to apply it to your life.
Yeah.
And learn how to apply it to your life experiences. And so older teens really enjoy that process because they long, to express themselves, and they long to be creative problem solvers. And so to me, that's like the nuts and bolts of education for our kids, it's that trivium approach. I know that's like way deep definition of it, but at the end of the day, the purpose is to know God, to make him known. And then the nuts and bolts of that, in our view and our conviction, is through that trivium approach. So
Wow. I love the classical.
love
We're
it.
learning. We're a year and a half in, and we're trying to institute it, and it's trying to
It's
weed
hard.
out that public education mentality of how you have to.
It's like test taking. It's like, oh, we're just taking tests. It's like, no, what would it be like if we actually developed the person? If we actually focused on their development in their vocabulary, their understanding of themselves, like virtue, their character. It's amazing what happens.
Well, and you're so worried about what they think, but honestly, we're bringing out the godly in them.
They're image bearers, they're creators.
Yeah.
They're by nature going to be problem solvers. So let's give them the tools. And you make a good point, and this is part of my problem, is I'm always worried about what they're thinking. And there's something in my DNA that drives my son crazy sometimes. I'm learning to pull back and like, no, I don't want to like think for you. I want you to think and develop your own thoughts and ideas, even if they're different from mine. And then let's work that out through discussion and dialogue. That's where that rhetoric piece is so cool. My son's in that phase right now. He's in that challenge phase where, they have their community days and classical conversations. They all come together. Well, they're debating ideas and like talking about really big subjects. And it's really cool because they have their own little identities at 14 years old, and they're like, they have thoughts and they have ideas and opinions.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to let them have that space and freedom that an adult is there facilitating. They're not controlling it. They're facilitating. And that conversation can go to Mars and back, and it's really developmentally, it's so profound and powerful to watch. These young kids, because you listen on the outside like, oh, okay, they're on rabbit trails. It's like, like that's what you do. It's like they're trying to figure it out. And instead of like giving them an answer and putting to regurgitate that on a test, they're actually figuring things out. And it's super rewarding to them because they're like, oh wow, I came to a conclusion. And it's sound. It has a logical conclusion. This makes sense. It's super cool.
That's
Love
really
it.
awesome.
So another question we like to ask Rob is, who is one of your heroes in history and why?
Yeah, I'm gonna break ranks on this. He is dead, to my defense.
We never put stipulations. It can be alive, dead, whatever.
He died in 2013, so he's not that old. He was not. But I would say one of my heroes and how I would define that is who has had the most profound impact on my life. A lot of people have had a profound impact on my life. A lot of literature has had a profound impact on my life. But this man has had a profound impact on my life. His name is Dallas Willard. He was a professor at USC of philosophy, but he used to be a pastor too, and he wrote from a Christian perspective. A very, 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 very amazing human being, in my view, in my estimation. I didn't know him personally, and I acknowledge that. However, the people that did know him personally, the testimony around his life, this was an amazing man. But one of the books that he wrote was called The Divine Conspiracy. It's a really, really popular book, and it's called Rediscovering Your Hidden Life in God. And what I love so much about him is, I'm going to butcher one of his statements, but he used to be a Baptist preacher of all denominations. He was a Baptist preacher who ended up in a university and became a massive influence in the university. But he was preaching and basically was like, listen, I don't think anything I'm doing is actually helping anybody. Am I actually helping people? And it kind of really shifted the trajectory of his understanding of the kingdom of God and what it means to be a part of that and their life. And so he brings things down, and kind of back to what we said earlier, out of the ethereal and into what he would call like the finer textures of life. And how that applies to the everyday stuff of being a disciple of Christ or being an apprentice. He used the word apprentice a lot. What does it mean to be an apprentice? You learn from them, you grow in them, you learn by acting and doing. And so he got really practical, even though he's an extremely intelligent man. He gets down into some of the nuts and bolts of what I call the everyday stuff of life. And one of his quotes that profoundly impacted me, because that's how it works, books don't change people, usually paragraphs do or sentences do. But he said the idea of having faith in Jesus has come to be totally isolated from being his apprentice and learning how to do what he said. And it was so simple and so profound. But when Jesus called us to be his disciple, that meant something.
Yeah.
It didn't mean I just made a decision and raised my hand or I confess him as Lord. It means that I'm like following him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like? Well, we know in the Gospels, we know we have examples of what that looked like through his disciples. And so he gets into those finer things. He's like, this isn't isolated from being his apprentice. No, you become his apprentice. And you actually follow him in everyday life. So that touches fatherhood, that touches motherhood, that touches what it means to be a family, that touches what it means to have work. It means what dignity is, dignity in work, regardless if it's great work, whether you make a ton of money or you make hardly any money at all. It touches everything you do. And not in like this crazy religious way, like in a truly profound transformational way, that I am literally an agent of light and salt, but I'm a person, I'm an individual, I'm Rob. And he wants me to be Rob, but he wants me to be a changed, transformed into the image of Christ type Rob. You know, I'm still Rob. And I still have gifts that he gave me and talents and ideas and thoughts and creativity. I'm an individual member of his collective body, you know. And so Dallas Willard brought unbelievable light in a really critical time because just to kind of give you, when I became a Christian, by nature, I'm a reader and a voracious, I love reading. So what I naturally was drawn to is like those higher kind of theological ideas. And it kind of removed my heart a little bit. And I got into all this stuff and systematic theology, biblical theology, soteriology, eschatology, all these great big words. And I just realized that I wasn't really living very much. And so he came at a time where I got introduced to his book that just, knocked my socks off, if I'm being honest. It brought me back to the word to be a follower of Jesus and to not have to necessarily have all the right answers, but to be a man of excellence, to be a man of character, to be a man of integrity, to be daily trying to transform my life into his image and likeness, to be an encouragement and to be a blessing to my community and not just be a guy that has a lot of lofty ideas.
Yeah.
Dallas Willard had a lot of lofty ideas. Dude was a brilliant man, but he had a way of bringing it into real life that changed me. And so Divine Conspiracy, then a book on a real practical level was called Spirit of the Disciplines. And I love how he worded that. It's not like the disciplines of the Christian life. No, there's a spirit behind it.
Yeah.
It's a heart of a changed heart. You're not doing this to earn anything. You're doing this because you love God.
Right.
You want to be changed. You want to be a better man or a better woman. And then he had a really profound book called Hearing God, about an interactive daily conversation with God. And he goes into more of how prayer looks in the daily life of a believer, especially ones that are busy and working and engaging in community. And what does that look like? Are you going to be locked in a room for 5 hours? Well, maybe at times, yes. However, there's a daily walk and a daily interaction with him. So that's a profound book as well. And he's got a great book called Renovation of the Heart, which is just the title of the book, just draws you in a little bit. It's like, okay, my heart needs renovated. So yes, give me that book. He's awesome. Probably one of the, he would never know this. I never met the man, but his teachings and his writings were not, and I'd be careful how I say this, because it wasn't like he was trying to garner a following. He genuinely, you could tell by reading, I genuinely want to help people.
Yeah.
Grow closer in their relationship to Jesus. So the attention wasn't on him, it was on the Lord. And it just draws you into this. It's not like you're listening to him speak. It's like, no, go after Christ. And so it was more away from man-centeredness and more on a Christ-centeredness approach to all the nuts and bolts of life. So changed my life big time.
That's awesome. I've never heard of him. So now I got more books to add to my.
Go read some books.
For sure.
It's like not Libre. Read some books.
Yep.
So how can people follow what you're doing, Rob?
Twitter is my main outlet that I'm not on like any other social media platforms. I'm not there yet. We do plan on opening some YouTube stuff in the near future, probably around outdoors and hunting. because we have a lot of fun with that. So I'm a big meat eater, deer hunter, and matter of fact, I was in the tree stands last night with my son. So trying to fill the freezers. But Fatherhood Ninja is my handle on Twitter. I don't tweet a lot. I tweet a couple times a day. I don't interact as much as I'd like, and I hope people have grace on me as the page keeps growing. More people ask questions. Man, I am busy because I full-time work that I do, also run another business, and then I'm trying to do this Twitter thing and launching out. You'll probably hear more from me on the Fatherhood Ninja with the Brotherhood of Valor. That's just kicking out, and we're still developing some of the pieces of that. But yeah, that one's going to be more of a passion project as we keep growing the Twitter page. The good thing about Twitter is once you pass thresholds, you can keep growing. Yeah, it's a little easier to grow once you hit a few thousand followers, and that helps. The algorithm kind of benefits you more in that. And so I try to play that game a little bit. And hopefully by this time next year, we'll have 20, 30,000 people on that page. That's the goal. And I think we've got a good pathway to get there. And I think that's when Brotherhood of Valor will really take off, is next year. But that's the main place. If you want to reach me, you can shoot me a message there. Sometimes it's delayed, but I'll do my best.
Nice.
Thank you, Rob, so much. It's been so fun to meet you today and get to know you and appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, bless you guys. Thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Diamond Education Podcast.
You can connect with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook
at Diamond Education, DIMOND, or on our website, diamonded.com.